What?
What, dude? That's so cool. And you did the Kickstarter out of this abandoned house?
I think that was after the Kickstarter, but we were definitely like minimizing our expenses.
Hello and welcome to the Open Hardware Manufacturing Podcast, the podcast about making open source hardware. My name is Stephen Haas.
And I'm Lucian Shapar.
And today we have a super cool guest. Bar Smith is now with us on the episode. Bar, how are you doing?
I'm fantastic. I couldn't be more stoked to be here.
Yeah, we're really stoked to chat with you. This was an awesome talk. We get into forums and community building and how do people feel like collectively part of the open source project and how you got going with the Maslow and your arc of stepping away from it and coming back. And like, it's so cool to hear about the way you've gone about doing it, dude.
Yeah, and we've been big fans of the Maslow for years now, so it's so cool to go full circle and get to hang out with you for a couple hours here and record this.
Yeah.
I completely agree. It's a ton of fun to talk about this stuff, and you guys are the goats of this, so thank you for having me.
I don't know about that, but also, before we get into the full episode, Bar has an active Kickstarter for the Maslow 4.1. We're going to put a link in the description, so go check it out. It's a super cool machine. I have a Maslow 4. It's sick. Go check out the Kickstarter. Show them some love if you want a CNC machine.
It's a really awesome machine. It's a low-cost way to get into large format CNC, and it's better than it's ever been. Go show that Kickstarter some love and check it out.
Yeah, let's hop into the episode.
Let's do it. Ready, Bar?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Bar, thank you so much for coming on the episode. I'm so excited to chat with you about Maslow and like the whole arc, dude. I'm really excited.
Yeah, man, it's really awesome to have you here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's I'm a big fan of the podcast, so it's cool to be on it. And yeah, I love everything you guys do for the open source community. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Bar. You too.
Yeah. It takes a village.
Yeah, it super does. It super does. And like, I so love the way that you will go about doing the open source thing. And like, I want to talk about some of the differences about how you guys do it versus how we do it. And like, I love your approach. I love the way that you guys play the game with the whole thing. But first, for context, for people that don't know what Maslow is, if people aren't familiar with the project, what is it and like roughly how it works? And then I want to get into like how you got into the whole thing, how you kicked off the whole process of starting this company.
Yeah, so Maslow is a CNC router. Specifically, it's a large format CNC router, so you can cut full sheets of plywood. And the thing that's different about it than most other CNC routers is it slides around on the surface we're cutting. So it has 4 belts that extend out to the corners. And then basically by adjusting the length of those 4 belts, we drag the router that's cutting on the surface of the plywood. I got into it doing it that way. The first version was upright. It can be upright, sort of like a panel saw, or it can be flat. You can just attach it directly to your floor. And the reason I got into doing it that way is it was actually a conversation I had with a guy at Maker Faire.
That's cool, really?
Yeah. Yeah. And this was like, I don't know, 2012 or something. It's like throwback. They're old school Maker Faire.
Sure.
I was just chatting with a guy and he was like, you know what I really want is like an upright CNC router, like a panel saw, so it takes up less space in my shop. And I was like, oh man, that's a cool idea. And then I started, thinking about how to do that. And I was like, okay, like gravity, we've got gravity as a factor now. And the original version of Maslow works sort of like one of those hanging plotters.
Yeah.
Where basically there's 2 chains that come down and it moved it around. We found that the 2 chains couldn't provide enough force to cut as fast as we wanted to.
What do you mean by force? Like it couldn't, your motors couldn't pull the tool through the material hard enough?
So the motors could pull the tool through the material, but in the downward direction, because it has chains, you can't push on a chain.
Right.
And so we were relying on gravity. And so we actually had bricks that you'd put on there for extra weight. And the force of gravity on those bricks wasn't hard enough. So we ended up adding two more. We switched from chains to belts. We added 2 more belts to the lower side of it. So now it pulls itself in all directions.
Sure.
I remember your early communications. You're like, bricks not included. Get your own brick. BYOB. Bring your own brick.
Yeah, we're not shipping you bricks.
Yeah, we're like, what can you get everywhere? And then we had a guy who he backed us on the very original Kickstarter. And he was in Lao, I think. And he was like, hey, man, I can't get bricks here. And I used a little chance of cement. And I was like, absolutely. I didn't realize that there was places without bricks, but like anything heavy will work.
Just as long as you can hold down the machine. Just do it.
Gravity works everywhere.
That's wild, dude. So it was literally just a conversation with a dude at Maker Faire. And you're like, that's cool. And then you started mess around with the idea? Did you immediately like start trying to prototype it from there?
I think I kicked the idea around in my head for maybe like 6 months after that.
Yeah.
I was in college and I was working in a lab that did feedback control stuff. And the other thing that's unique about Maslow is we don't use stepper motors, we use servo motors. So we have an encoder and we're continually like reading the position and correcting. And I think that I just happened to be working in a lab that did feedback control stuff. So I was really into that at the time. And I think that was a really important part of it because doing what we do with stepper motors would be really hard because we need a lot of torque, like an insane amount of torque. And so you can get that with a DC gear motor pretty easily. But with a stepper motor, there are geared stepper motors now that could do it. But back in 2016 or whatever, it was kind of like you had your standard NEMA stepper motors and that was it. But there's those gear motors that they use in like paper shredders and stuff that there's good supply chain for.
Sure. Yeah. Easy to source, easy to get, good QC, all that stuff. That's wild. Okay. So now you've made this prototype thing. The very first time I had ever become aware of Maslow was probably shortly after when you had made that first one, when you were on Tested, which is the Adam Savage YouTube channel. And I saw that and I was like, what a wacky, unique way to do CNC milling. I thought it was the coolest. And it was so cheap. Your kit was like incredibly inexpensive. Like the material cost was not bad. So was that the very first time you guys started to try and sell it? Was that whole Tested arc?
Yeah, it was. That was exactly. Basically, we wanted to make it. We wanted to make it really cheap, and we just wanted to get it out there. Like originally, it was a thing that I created as an open source project. I just posted the files online. I was like, "This is cool," and then I sort of realized that if I just posted the files and didn't sell anything, there would be a small number of people who would be excited about it and be willing to build it from scratch. But just like not that many people would actually ever get their hands on them. Because you got to be really invested in a project to be like, I'm going to source each of these parts individually. And such small differences can make a huge difference in terms of like, especially for closed loop stuff where it's like you've got to tune your PID loops and stuff. It's like someone's using a slightly different motor than me. Maybe the machine works for me, but not for them kind of thing. So I was like, I'm going to make a kit that has all the parts. And I kind of thought it was like a one and done. I was like, I'll just like do some kits, throw this idea out in the world. Because I just thought it was such a cool idea. I wanted it to be out there. And I was like, if I do kits once, someone else will take the idea and run with it and it'll become a thing. And I just have to like get it started.
So you never really wanted to like run a thing making these things. You kind of wanted to just be the seed and show people, hey, this is a valid way to do this. Yeah. Go world, pursue it. So I'm not having to do it myself.
Exactly. The goal was to hand it off to the world.
Because you didn't want to run it? Why didn't you want to do it yourself?
It's not that I didn't want to run it. It's more that I didn't feel qualified to run it. I remember at the time feeling really like I had this interesting idea, but I just graduated from college. I didn't know how to run a business. I didn't know how to do, my background's electrical engineering. So there was so much like software development that I was like in over my head, like supply chain stuff. I was just like winging everything. So I remember feeling like I was like, I want this idea to go out into the world and live. I don't feel like I have the skills that it needs to like get it out there. So like, I'll just try to get it started and see if someone else will take it over. And I think something that like was a big takeaway from that process is that like, at the end of the day, like if you are the person doing something, you're sort of by definition the most qualified. Like they're qualified, but no one else was trying.
Yeah,
so, like, I guess I'm it.
Yeah, you're now the expert on a chain-driven, cable-driven CNC machine. Like you're not.
Yeah.
And that expertise might be pretty limited. Like there's a lot of things I didn't know, but I was willing to like give it a shot. But then we went to Maker Faire. And sort of shortly after we created it, we were doing the Kickstarter. We went to Maker Faire and Norm from Tested just like walked by our booth and was like, "This is cool. You want to come on our show?" And
wow,
totally like no, like we did nothing to make that happen. That was just like the universe threw us like a complete freebie.
Sure.
And that video got like millions of views. Like that was like the only reason we got launched.
Right.
It really helped make a name for it.
Yeah.
And did you guys have the Kickstarter live when that video went up? So did that like feed people in?
We did. Super good people in. Massively good people in. That was
really?
like our main source of people coming to the Kickstarter.
Interesting. Yeah. And also you mentioned this briefly, and I want to poke at this a little bit. You said you have a background in electrical engineering. Yeah. Like you went to school for that, but you also have written so much of the software for this and the mechanical design. Like I am blown away at all of the stuff that is in your brain that facilitates getting this whole thing made. It's crazy how full stack. And I know that you have a huge community of people that are also like hugely helpful for it as well. But like, how did you get all that together in your brain to facilitate this? Like whipping up a prototype is not a straightforward thing for what you made. It's like a new way of controlling motion. Aside from the plotters, you probably could pull from that. But, you know, where did all those skills come from? You know,
I wish I had pulled from the plotters a lot more, to be honest. About the plotters until after the Kickstarter had launched. It's like, this is like a hanging plotter, but for CNC. And I was like, a what?
Wow.
Bummer, dude.
The thing with copying the plotter code is it was all stepper motor based, and we're doing closed loop stuff, so there wasn't really an easy way to copy it. I don't know. I just kind of winged it, and a lot of it was bad. Like, I think a huge part of the success of the project came from the fact that no one else was doing anything similar.
Yeah.
And so there was a big novelty factor of people would see it and just be like, oh shit, that works.
Yeah.
Like you can do that. And like, just, it was interesting to look at just as like oh, I've never seen something like this before.
Yeah.
That gave us enough for people being forgiving of the fact that there was a lot. It was so new that there was a lot of like things that could have been done better that we learned along the way. But if there'd been someone else doing it at all, we wouldn't have been able to compete with them.
Right.
Like okay. I don't think I was particularly good at software development or good at supply chain or any of those things that it takes to like make a project. It's just we were the only one.
So you had like a first mover's advantage, kind of. You had the ability.
First mover's advantage, and just being willing to like. I just graduated from college. I didn't have to spend any money on anything. I was like, I will just like sit here and do this. We literally worked in a basement, like it was a dirt floor basement.
Wow. Bar no.
And right, we had to like crouch down.
And like, I want to give you some credit here too, because I feel like where you felt you had weaknesses, you were so communicative. I remember following your campaign updates when that was going on, and like you're talking about like what's a realistic expectation to have for the machine. You talk about the tolerances in the center of travel or the outer edges, and like people knew what they were going to get in the state it existed before you shipped anything. Like you were incredible about that.
Thanks. I think that came from a lot of stress of like I felt like very much an imposter, and so I just wanted to be like really transparent with people because that helps me a lot. It's like if I run into an issue and I'm like, oh man, I'm stressed about this. If I can tell people about it, one, I don't feel as stressed about it anymore because it's not like this thing that I'm like keeping to myself where I'm like, oh no, what if like we can't deliver? What if like something goes wrong? It's like everyone knows about it. Yeah. And two, the community is so incredibly helpful of like the number of times that I've been stuck on something and been like, I don't know what we're going to do. And someone will come out of the woodwork and be like, hey, I'm actually like an expert in whatever.
Right.
Like, I remember there was this guy who came and contributed, and he was like a mathematician. He was like helping us solve some of like the kinematics math. And he was like a professor at a university, and he was like, yeah, I can like solve this math. And he like wrote a whole paper of like how to do it. And I was like, cool. Like, are you using it on your machine? Like, he was like, oh, I don't have one. And I was like, do you want one? And he was like, cool math problem. I don't do woodworking. And I was like, whoa, where did this guy come from? Like, how did you get this dude who just wanted to like solve this interesting problem? And like, being communicative, like, I think helps a lot with, there's people out there listening who, when you get stuck on something, can help that I didn't even know were out there.
Right. Yeah. Huge benefit of being communicative about what you're doing. And because those people are going to find you. Like, so, I mean, this guy, did he find out about the project through the original tested video and your first Kickstarter? Like, that was your huge inrush. And like, once you got those machines out to people, is that when you started to get feedback? Were you getting it before you actually got hardware out to people and it was still just the design?
We got a bit of feedback in just the design phase. I think it is really helpful to get hardware in people's hands to get feedback.
Yeah.
I think that's like a key. I think that's one of the hardest things about doing open source hardware is finding that balance between you want to ship as early as possible to get hardware in people's hands so you can get feedback because it's an open source project because everyone's contributing.
Yeah.
And it's really hard for people to contribute before they have hardware. At the same time, you want to give people the best hardware they can. It's you can move really fast as an open source hardware project, but it's frustrating for people if you're like, we shipped something last week and now it's out of date.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like you want to, I don't know. I think that's something we're still figuring out how to navigate. I think the proliferation proliferation of 3D printing has helped out a lot.
Sure.
Because like we are able to post files and people can iterate pretty quickly. And then once we have a design that's pretty stable, we can do like an injection molded version and like disseminate it more broadly. But
sure. Like if the vitamins, quote unquote, like the motors and the bearings and all that kind of stuff stays more or less the same, it's pretty easier at least for people to iterate at home based on those small changes. As long as you're not changing any of those other, big things, it gets quite a lot easier.
And like, and you played it so well. Like the original Maslow there were cut templates for wood. Like, I don't think you needed, correct me if I'm wrong, you didn't need a 3D printer to make one yourself. You bought a really low cost hardware kit and you just went at it.
Yeah.
I didn't even have a 3D printer until 2020 or something. Like I was pretty late to the 3D printing game.
Wow. That's so cool. I don't need it. Whatever. You're talking to woodworkers. It makes sense that those people are going to have a jigsaw and a sheet of plywood,
Right. Yeah. That was our demographic. And just like, I think the 3D printer woodworking communities have like overlapped more and more as 3D printings become easier and woodworking's become more technological. Mm-hmm. But like back in the day, it was just like, people didn't want to use computers kind of thing. I remember there being a lot of like pushback in terms of people were like, this is cheating. You can't do woodworking with a robot.
Oh my God.
I was like, you're not wrong. It kind of is, but
it's like, I can make something I couldn't have done otherwise. It's
it's cheating in that I couldn't do it any other way. Like this guy's never wrong that I couldn't cut this straight of a line or this curve, but like,
right. You can't use this chisel. You have to carve this with your fingernails. It's like, come on, like whatever.
It's faded away a lot. I think the woodworking community is mostly on board with CNC stuff now. But
yeah. So, and I totally agree with you, Ree, the, getting hardware in people's hands. Cause when we released the Lumen source, some people built it, maybe a couple hundred people built a Lumen, maybe a little more than that.
Oh, that's really good. That's awesome.
Once we had a kit, and it was really helpful for us finding stuff beforehand, right? Like people built it and we were able to prevent that before shipping. But with a kit, oh man, it was just orders of magnitude different on what kind of feedback we were getting. People were thinking about it more in line with the product, but it's like, it's still a kit. It's still a, early version of this hardware. What's that balance of how baked is it? How much are you willing to go for a bit of a ride and get this thing's more of a project and less of a tool? Mm-hmm. It's just hard to strike that.
Super hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's unique to open source stuff because it's like when you buy pretty much anything else, most products, if they're shipped sort of half baked, that's like they're just not done. Whereas like open source stuff, you kind of have to ship it half baked because if it's fully done, you're not taking advantage of the community.
Yeah. Like unless you're hoping people are building it at home for fun, but that's a way smaller amount of people. I think that it's like you just got to be communicative about, like you said, exactly where it is. There was in your Maslow 4 Kickstarter, you had this bug where like it would just randomly, the microcontroller would crash and it was really hard to replicate. And like, I remember reading all those updates about that. And you're like, I still don't know what it is. Yeah. You guys are going to be dealing with this bug. I'm working on it. And it's just like, it was great. It was just so, here's the sitch. I'm a dude trying to make a cool thing. Here's what it is. I loved that. I thought that was such a cool way to do it.
Thanks. Yeah. It's there's no other way we could do it. We don't have the resources to do anything else. So
right. Yeah. Yeah. So once you started getting that feedback after that very first kit, did you immediately start rolling it in? And like, in what way were you getting it? Was it mostly through Kickstarter or did you have another place where people were giving you that feedback?
We got a forums, I think, pretty much immediately. The Kickstarter comments and messages are garbage.
Yeah. Just across the board.
Just across the way they handle it is like, so messages, only the person who created the project can respond to messages. So if there's anyone else working on it or message each other, so people can only message me. People can't message Anna. People can't message anyone else. Like It's just that. And then there's the Kickstarter page and every update, we do a weekly update. Mm-hmm. Every update has its own comment section and they don't link or interact in any way. Mm-hmm. You get these like fragmented conversations. Like it pretty much immediately became clear that Kickstarter, I love many things about Kickstarter, but the community building aspect of it was like not there. And we switched to a forums that worked okay for like 6 months. And then we found Discourse and I love Discourse.
Yeah.
I am on there every single day. First thing I do when I wake up, last thing I do before I go to bed. And it's a good forums platform. It's easy to read. It like encourages people to participate.
So are you guys hosting it yourself? Do you do it on Discourse? Because it's effectively like WordPress is to a blog website as Discourse is to like a forum, right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. I think it's a perfect analogy. We pay to have it hosted from Discourse. It's kind of expensive. It's like $200 a month or something.
Okay.
But I like supporting them because they're an open source project. And then also I'm just bad at that kind of thing. And I know it'll be more reliable and it'll get updated regularly and things like that. If you're hosting it. So I think it's worth it to the community. I think about it as rent. It's like our internet rent. And it's like we get so much value from it that it's like a no-brainer. I'm sure we could host ourselves for $20 a month, but I think it's worth it to have someone be on top of maintaining.
Right. What's the opportunity cost? Tool or project? You know, what's the opportunity cost of you spending all that time to set that up versus just spend $200 a month and just solve it? It's not my thing to think about.
There was like a 4-year period where we weren't selling anything and I was still paying $200 a month. And midway through that, I was like, why am I doing this? This is not my job. I'm paying. It's like one of my bigger bills every month is like this forum hosting. But even then, I didn't even really have any serious thoughts about not doing it.
So did you pipe people into your Discourse server from the Kickstarter? Like, how did you populate your community server there?
We did. We piped people in. And one of the things we did, which at the time was just kind of an off the cuff thing, is we gave people who were Kickstarter backers a special badge in the forums.
Yeah.
And I mean, we just did it because we wanted to give people a shout out who like supported the project. We were like, these people like literally made it possible. So like, let's acknowledge them. Mm-hmm. But I think that piped more people in. I think people were like, I want to claim my special badge.
Oh, so you like send an email to Kickstarter backers of like, get your fancy badge in our server.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
It was not a marketing strategy or anything. It wasn't like a try to build community strategy. We were just like, we want to say thank you. Like, let's give a shout out to the people who are funding this.
Sure. But it did do that. It did do it.
I think it did.
So then did you then do another version? Now you have all this feedback on stuff. Like what did you hear from people? What was the next step after you got all that?
So we immediately did another version. We did another version like months later because the first version, we had 2 fixed anchor points on the sled. And basically it turns out the math for computing that is astoundingly complicated. It's like one of those things. It was a thing where I looked at it and I was like, yeah, computers are good at math. I have a math problem computers can't solve. Like, I'll just do it with software, right? That's what you do.
Right.
And then it turned out to be like a basically intractable problem. Doing the computation in real time was like undoable.
What?
It was we were pulling from like lens distortion, like math and like all this crazy stuff. And we very quickly realized we could just get rid of that entirely if we made it so the center of rotation of the sled was the router bit. So now if the sled rotated, it rotated around the router bit, which is already spinning at 20,000 RPM or something. So you don't care if it's rotating a little bit.
Right.
And that just solved a huge number of problems, made the math dead simple. Well, we do that as an upgrade kit. We basically immediately did an upgrade kit. And I don't even think we sold more full kits at that point. We just did it as an upgrade for folks who had the original kit.
Sure.
And that's where that's when you do like the linkages or like the rotating joints that keep it engaged.
Exactly. And the linkages were cool because that was a kit someone else sold. That was an add-on for our machine. Like it was very scrappy. Like we were like in the forums, like people were selling all kinds of like, their own versions and like,
wow.
Yeah, it was very much like a Cambrian like world of like you get all kinds of weird things.
So you literally already, dude, that's crazy. So like you had your Kickstarter, you get your first things out, and you said in a few months you had your upgrade kit that was based on a product someone in your community made to go on top of that first Kickstarter you did.
Yeah, I mean we
wow.
There was the person who did the linkage version, which was actually based on ours. Basically, we pretty quickly figured out what the solution was. And then there was just a lot of spitballing about what the right hardware solution to like implement that was.
Sure.
And there's a bunch of different ways you can implement that. So one person did the linkage thing. We chose to use a ring, which is like a metal ring. But yeah, there was a lot of like trying things and exploring. And it was like an exciting.
That's fast, dude. It's also really funny. Normally people will say, oh, we'll fix it in software. And you had the opposite. You're like, it's really a hard software problem. Oh, we'll fix it in hardware.
Yeah. And that's one of the things about open source hardware is like, you kind of can do that. Like you can put out hardware updates.
Wow. That's crazy. So then you just sold those, like, did you have like a web store set up where you were selling those kits? And like, what was the mechanism through how that money was coming in for those kits and stuff? It wasn't still, you didn't do another Kickstarter, did you?
No, we had a Squarespace store set up at that point, but also I don't think we were really making any money.
Yeah. How are you paying your bills at this point? Was the Kickstarter like keeping you fed and housed and stuff?
The Kickstarter was paying the bills, but I mean, we had no bills. Like I was 21 or something, and I was like, where was I living?
You did this in college, dude? That's crazy.
It was immediately after college. So I just had yeah, that's, I was living with a house with a bunch of friends. I think I was paying like $200 a month in rent. Like the house we were living in was abandoned when we got there. Like, we rented a warehouse space from this woman, and she was a realtor, and she had just sold the house, and she gave us keys to the house and was like, you all should go live there. And we were like, who owns the house? And she was like, don't worry about it, because she just sold it. She didn't own the house anymore. We lived in this house for 2 weeks before we found out who owned the house.
What, dude? That's so cool. And you did the Kickstarter out of this abandoned house?
I think that was after the Kickstarter, but we were definitely like minimizing our expenses.
We'll call it bootstrapped. There were not boots even to strap.
Right, exactly. Dude, that's so cool.
But again, I wasn't trying to start a business. I was just trying to, like, I wasn't like, is this sustainable long term? I was like, I'm going to do this fun project for like the next, couple months, and then I'll like go get a real job. Like I didn't see it as like, I'm trying to start a business that's going to be like a viable career option.
Sure.
I was like, I made this thing. I'm going to throw it out into the world and like try to give it its best shot at like becoming a thing.
Kind of like jump out of the nest, fly on your own. I'm not going to feed you worms anymore, to really butcher the analogy.
Exactly.
Okay. So then is that what you did? Like after you did those upgrade kits, did you punt? Like what happened?
We did. Yeah. So we moved to Portland, and my business partner, Hannah, and I, she wanted to move to Portland because she was playing Ultimate Frisbee and she wanted to play Ultimate Frisbee there.
Cool.
I was like, I'll move to Portland. And we worked out of this really cool place called ADX, which is Art Design Portland, where it was a big warehouse, and they just taped off a bunch of like little spots on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And you could like rent for like no money. You could like rent a little like floor space.
Yeah.
And it was like, there were like dozens of like people doing like weird, it was like furniture makers and people doing art and glass blowing. And like, we just had a really cool community of like other people there doing weird stuff.
Yeah.
You were by far the most corporate. You guys have like a website where you can buy things. Everyone else just did like art. And so
you have an EIN?
Yeah, exactly. we had an EIN. And so we were like the kind of sellouts there. But that environment, it didn't feel that crazy what we were doing, because I was like, well, that guy doesn't have any plans. So like,
sure.
And it was perfect because we got all the like resources of a bigger space. Like there was a forklift in the building we could use. It didn't have brakes, but
Wow. You got to Fred Flintstone it and just drag your foot alongside.
You had to be very careful about how fast you got going in what direction. Actually, I loved the forklift so much that I was like the person who was like stoked on the forklift. Everyone else thought it was terrible.
Yeah.
And they waited until I went backpacking. So I was gone for a week, and they sold it when I was away.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Oh, that stinks, dude.
For the picture of the forklift on it, because I liked it so much.
Oh, I love driving forklifts.
Oh, yeah. It's so fun. It's like superpower. You're like, I can lift anything.
So that's where you guys started. So it sounded like when you moved to Portland, you were like, okay, we should continue this though.
Yeah. So that was when we got a little bit serious about being like, let's make it a business. Let's keep doing it. And we did it in Portland for like a year and a half, I think. And then we just got really burned out. It was like, I felt like I was just like always scrambling. Like I didn't have a clear plan for what came next after the like, let's throw this thing into the world.
Yeah.
And I think there was a bit of a transition at that point where we were moving away from like that moment of like the early adopters who are like, I want to buy a thing that's not finished and help make it.
Yeah.
So we were getting more people who are like, I just want to buy a thing that works.
Right.
And that is an entirely reasonable thing to ask for. It's like, I just want to buy a thing that works.
Yep.
But we just couldn't really give them that. And so like we knew what I had a clear understanding of what the next step sort of version is, which is now Maslow 4. It took me like years to get there, but I had a clear vision of what that was, but I knew it was going to take a long time and we didn't have the money to do it. And I was also just burned out. I was like, I didn't realize I was jumping into a multi-year thing when I started.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm going to take some time off. We stopped selling kits and we maintained the website, we maintained the software, we maintained the forums, but I took a step back and got like a real job for a while.
What was the real job?
I got a couple of real jobs. I worked on a DNA sequencer project for a while.
What? Really?
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't open source. It was very much proprietary. Yeah, we were doing nanopore sequencing. So basically, you would take it was like a custom made silicon chip that had a tiny hole in it.
Yeah.
And you would suck up. It was so small that a piece of DNA you could pull the strand of DNA through the hole using like electromagnetic forces, and we never successfully sequenced it. But we did some like diagnostic stuff. That company raised a bunch of money. I was never that invested in it. I got a job because I had no money. I was like, it was a cool job. I'm excited I got to work there, but it wasn't a passion project.
Yeah. It was a startup then, if they raised a bunch of money and
very startup. Yeah.
So for you, taking a break, quote unquote, was going to work at a DNA sequencing startup.
Yeah, but I got a paycheck. Like I knew I was getting it every single month.
Right.
I could pay rent. It's stressful, like not having a paycheck. I had, health insurance and like it was like, a real job.
Yep. Yeah. You found the job to facilitate what you had to do otherwise.
Exactly.
Right.
So what made you want to get back into Maslow and like quit that job?
Yeah.
So it was always the dream. The first version showed me there were 3 things I needed to come up with solutions for that I felt like I was like, if I have these 3 things figured out, that's when I'd be like ready to jump back into it.
Uh-huh.
And they were, the first version was too slow. It was, the first version could do about 30 inches per minute, which is fine for kind of like messing around and experimenting. But if you want to like really be building stuff, because at the end of the day, I want to make a tool. Like I like the project and it's a cool thing to work on. But like the dream is that there's a pipeline where at the end, this is a thing you can go buy at Home Depot and people will buy it who don't care about it as a project, who just want to make stuff. So I want to be like moving in that direction. And I think that being a lot faster is important for that. It just saves a lot of time. The other big issue is self-calibration. So the calibration process on the first one was very difficult. It required you to manually measure things very precisely. And the whole point of having a CNC router is that like as humans, we're bad at measuring things, or at least I am.
Did you have to do it all the time, or was it like a one-time setup? Because, I'd rather measure one thing really precisely once and then never have to think about it again rather than do it every time I want to make a cut,
It was a one-time thing, but we found that even like tape measures weren't consistently accurate enough. Like we had a guy in our forums. Yeah, we had a guy in our forums who went and grabbed. He's like, I have like 6 tape measures, and he like laid them all out, and like over the 11 feet or whatever it is we were trying to measure, they differed by like 1/8 of an inch. Like
that's so cursed.
That tracks.
Yeah.
What?
We have a buddy who makes tape measures for a living, and we hear that from him all the time.
Yeah.
Wait, he makes tape measures for a living?
Yeah, they're like smart and
internet connected and stuff.
That's really cool. But yeah, it's needed. Like there's a lot of bad tape measures out there. And the way the system was set up was that error would compound. So if you were off by 1/8 of an inch in your measurement, your results would be off by 1/4 inch kind of thing, which was like too much.
Right.
And then the third issue was the original version, it used chains and the motors were mounted to the frame itself, which sort of meant that there was no clear path for like this thing fits in a box and you buy a box and it's like the whole product.
Right.
And so I wanted to work on that because if the goal is that someday you go to Home Depot and buy a thing and you just like have a big CNC router that comes in a box, there has to be a plan for like it comes in a box. And so I had those sort of 3 goals, and I was tinkering with it for years, just sort of playing around with different ideas. And that's how I ended up on the current version, which is Maslow 4.
So when you were working these, as you say, big boy jobs or, like grown up jobs or whatever, you were working on it at this point, but you had gone into Maslow originally as just here's a cool thing, here you go world.
Yeah.
And then you said, okay, no, now I'm going to do the job thing. What changed where you're like, nah, I need to shepherd this thing more? Like, why?
Yeah.
What changed in your tune of being like, oh, I'm done with this now?
So what changed was when I stopped selling kits, I felt super confident that it had enough momentum that it was going to live on its own.
Right.
Because when we first launched it, a lot of the feedback was people like, this can't work. You'll hit a knot in the wood and it'll like explode or like,
yeah.
like I remember getting in a YouTube comments argument with some guy once where he was like, this is CGI. And I was like, CGI. You just tell by the way the sawdust is rendering, like it's not real sawdust. And I remember just being like, I shouldn't have engaged, but I like lost this argument with this dude who was claiming the whole thing was CGI. Like people just didn't believe it was possible. And I felt to overcome that. We were like, no, we shipped hardware to people. It's in the world. The idea is clearly possible. There's so much potential there. Some big company is going to come along and scoop this up. Like I'm not needed anymore. And we turned over all of our, basically it was fully open source. We announced we were like, anyone who wants to like take the idea and run with it is welcome to. A couple of different companies like took the idea. And I expected that those companies competing with each other would push the price down, would push like innovation. And like a year later, the cost had gone up a lot. There was no innovation happening. Yeah, prices like doubled for the kit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I think that just seeing it and there was no innovation happening. It was not really moving forward. I wasn't impressed with the pace of progress.
Yeah.
And I think that the thing that made me come back was realizing that if I didn't come back, it wasn't going to go anywhere.
Wow. Bar, that's so cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool. It's all about like making the project exist. You're like, no, I'm not done getting this into the world. Like it didn't grip in the way I wanted to. And like multiple companies still picked it up and sold it. And you're like, that's not enough. I need to get it out more so in a different way. That's so baller.
Yeah, to look at it and go, it needs me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so. You saw the Batman symbol on the Maslow logo on the clouds, and you're like, I'm needed.
Your kid went to college for you, and you're like, he didn't do too hot. I'm gonna.
I'm making him go to grad school.
It feels like I don't know why, but it's this weird thing that I have to do. It's like I have to make this thing exist. And sometimes it's awesome and I'm like, I feel really lucky and I feel like I have this like sense of purpose and I'm like, I love that I get to work on something I care so much about. Yeah. And other times I'm like, why can't I live a normal life? Like I could have a normal job. I could like I could there'd be easier paths, but
yep. They certainly would be. So what you said there was like a kind of like a handoff to these other companies or was it informal? Did they just kind of like pick up the IP and run with it or
informal. It was all fully open source. We announced that we weren't going to be making them anymore, but we offered to give introductions to anyone who wanted to sell kits to all the factories we were working with and that they could use our tooling because we paid for a bunch of tooling.
Wow,
so
no way.
We intentionally did everything basically public. We tried not to have any private communication with any of the companies or make any sort of deals with anyone. So there was no handoff to any specific company. It was just something that we were like, this exists out in the world. You can take it on. Because we didn't want to try to pick a successor. Because my goal was that people would compete and it would be like, so we didn't take any money from any of the companies. We didn't have any deals with any of the companies, which actually has turned out to be kind of a curse. Because one of those companies has basically, they're just sort of bad actors. And they're currently trying to trademark the name Maslow CNC, which is our project name. Yeah.
Wow.
It's like kind of a hassle that it's like we gave these people all of our designs and everything, and they're like,
and they want the trademark too.
Yeah. I think that that's one of the things that I was the least impressed with going open source. The community is incredible, but I was really hoping that by being open source, we would be able to more successfully hand off the business side of things.
Yeah.
And I think that the lesson I've learned is that running a business is hard and doing it well is hard to the extent that, I'll let people judge themselves if we're doing it well. But like, I think just running a business is really hard and that just because you have a good idea and you put all the designs out there doesn't necessarily mean someone else is going to come along and turn it into a business. I think there's a lot within the closed source world. There's a lot of like stress about people stealing your idea.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm just like, please steal my idea. All of the designs are in one GitHub repo and I will personally help you do it. You're like, wow, still did. No one was able to steal it.
I even have your like V1 source downloaded as we speak. And like you have a list of all the suppliers and their email address. And it's right next to bomb.csv.
Yeah, like we like did everything we could to be like, please take this, and it still didn't happen. So that's why we came back, because we were like, all right, like if we want this to exist, but the dream is still the same. Like I think I just was like a little too early. The dream is still like, I want DeWalt to take it. I want like, you know, Ryobi to be like, because I think once we get it to the point where truly all of the kinks are worked out and it's like, this is clearly a finished thing, there will be companies that will come in and swoop it up and like start selling it. And that's the goal. Like the goal is to get it copied. The dream for me is that like owning a large format CNC router is as unique as owning a chop saw. You know, it's like you go to someone's house and they have a chop saw. You're not like, oh my God, dude, is that a chop saw?
Wow. Dude, what a cool perspective on that. That is just like the most rad thing ever. I think in many ways we have a lot of similarities, because like our mission of the company is to help people make their products, and like competitors are trying other things. They're trying new things. All ships rise with the rising tides. If they make a cheaper product, if they make a better product, cool. We're going to learn from that. We're also going to try and do that. Like we want it to get easier to make stuff holistically. Like some of the best way for us to do that is to sell machines to fund people spending time on development. But we want it to be better. Like that's the whole reason this organization exists. And it feels very similar. I think we just, after it's there, at least I want it to continue to do it after it already feels like the institution. If people want to do it, that's great. But I want to do that as well. But to be like, no, it truly is like, it feels like a public service. Like I want to show how this can be a useful tool for people. It can be a chop saw, commoditized to the point of a chop saw. And let it go out, have other people handle the distribution and the manufacturing at that point once it gets there. Like, that's so cool. That's such a cool way to look at it, dude.
I think that really comes across I've been watching your YouTube videos since like long before we met at Open Sauce. Like, and I think it really comes across that's like, you guys are creating a thing that's like part engineering and part art. Like there's like an art aspect of, you're like taking this thing that's like super like remote. I have never seen an industrial taking place in person, you know, kind of thing. It's like this like thing that happens in factories somewhere else, and factories are for big companies. And you're like, no, this like esoteric thing is a thing that you can own and can be part of your life. And like bringing that sort of manufacturing to just into the world that people that, you know, cohabitates with real humans that I interact with is like really powerful and like beautiful. Like as an art project, I think is really beautiful. Yeah. And then as a machine, it's also really beautiful.
It feels really good to hear that. Making technology accessible is definitely like a core tenet of ours. And like, if we can make more people own a pick and place machine than they would have otherwise, like we sleep good at night.
Yep. Yeah. But Lucian says something about the source a lot. And it's like, it's not our source, like the Lumen repo. It's like, we're the shepherds of it. Like we're the ones who are making most of the commits and stuff, but like, not ours. It's licensed into the world with a license, you know, like that's what it is. It's not us, which is,
and it will live on beyond you. Like God forbid you were to get hit by a bus tomorrow, Lumen would still exist in 10 years.
Right.
Like, or like people would be making machines based on your work in 10 years.
Right.
Ideally, we don't get hit by a bus, but ideally, yes, that is true.
Fun fact: I have an emergency ocular recovery plan in an envelope hidden in a place only Lucian knows about. So if I do get hit by a bus, he can like recover things. Like we have like the hit by a bus plan sorted.
And I almost got hit by a bus last Monday.
Yeah, that's true.
With a good dry run. Yeah,
you need to make one of those plans too. We both need a get hit by a bus plan. But yeah, that's so cool. And like, it must have been really interesting coming back after having, how many years was it that you were not pursuing the Maslow project, that you've been kind of noodling on how Maslow 4 was going to be? And then, cause you were prepping for the Kickstarter when I met you at Open Sauce, which was 2023.
Yeah.
You were getting ready to start diving into that. How did that feel coming back in with a new design, being like, I'm back, I'm Jobs leaving Next Computer and I'm coming back to run Apple again? Like, what was that like?
It felt good. It felt really good. I was just really excited about the new version. I was like really excited to share it with people. I think that I really found a way to sort of check all the boxes I was trying to check. And it was really like a step change in what was out there. I was like, I think we can offer something that's cheaper and dramatically better than any of the other options that existed at the time. So yeah, it felt really good. I think that it also felt good to do it again, having to, like, there were so many things that I was just very scared of the first time around. I was like, what if I wire money to someone on Alibaba and they just steal our Kickstarter money and then we just can't deliver?
Right.
It's scary the first time you go to a bank and they're like, do you want to wire $20,000 to this company that you sent, a couple dozen emails to? Right. And they're like, do you know these people? And I'm like, no, I don't know these people.
I met them online.
Yeah. And now I'm sure you're desensitized to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it felt good the second time around to be like, I remember doing this exact process and being terrified. And like this time around, I'm like, yeah, we know what we're doing a little bit.
That's so cool.
That's how Stephen and I felt going from like after the BYOP, like the V3 felt like we had done many dress rehearsals already. Like it smelled polished and rehearsed. So like by the time we did V4, it was like very little stress, very calculated. We had to delay announcement by a week from a date we had picked like 8 months prior.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was only because like COVID lockdown stuff really, like things were, we put so much buffer. It was like a 4-week thing, but yeah.
That was V3. On V4, we only had to delay because one box was a little late.
Yep. Yeah, that Sourcely stuff's, it's a whole rigmarole. But so then you did a Kickstarter for Maslow 4 and that went super well.
I want to ask more about that because it's I feel like there's a little bit of a tricky transition from the like fully scrappy. Like I think that part of the excitement of people following along is that like, are they going to make it kind of thing?
Right.
And I feel like I've been following you guys since the beginning, basically. I don't know when YouTube recommended me when the algorithm brought me to your videos, but it was a long time ago. And like you can really tell how much more polished and like, it's just like a professional machine now. Like you guys are really just like making a tool that's awesome.
Yeah. And like, it was not at first. It took a while to get to that point.
Of course. Yeah. But at first it was like, I was like, are they going to, be able to do it? Like, are they going to be able to build this thing? And now it's like, you built the thing and now it's just like, can we keep making it better? Right. But how I feel like there's some trick to like keeping the magic of like people engaged and like, and it gets harder to contribute too. Like when there's big issues, someone can just jump in and be like, hey, like this is really messed up. Like you got to do it differently. And it's like, you can make big contributions, but like I've been feeling like as we've been getting things more and more refined, it's harder for an average person to join the project and really make a contribution just because it's at such a point that you have to like read the docs and learn about what things are and like get on board with like all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I think that's
sorted.
Yeah. For me, it feels like when you have a more mature open hardware project like Maslow 4 or like Lumen PMP V4, I think a lot of the contribution to the hardware design comes from like listening to the users and hearing about what worked for them or what didn't. Like it takes a lot of onboarding for someone to understand our repo and our like GitHub commit policies. And like, it's very rare where we see like a PR to CAD if ever these days. So like most of the improvements in community engagement on like machine enhancement comes again, just from listening to people talk about it and see like where they get stuck or like what they'd like to be easier.
Right. If it doesn't feel so fluid anymore and it feels like it's like, for lack of a better word, more coagulated, it's solidified in what it is. It doesn't feel like there's something to contribute to. Like, do you guys know BPS Space? It's a YouTube channel. Joe Barnard.
Love that
awesome
channel.
Dude. He's so cool. He is working on a space shot right now and trying to get a rocket into space, like legally, however that's defined in terms of altitude. Right. And it's like a multi-year process. I was talking to them about it at Open Source and like how much money and time and everything goes into it. And I feel like getting to V4 Lumen and Maslow V4 is a quote unquote space shot. It's like, here's the arc of like, can they do it? And after you do the space shot, it's like, okay, what's the next space shot? Like, what's the next narrative arc is almost kind of what it feels like. What's the next open source community driven development project that comes afterwards, because now it's like, okay, cool, we did it. Here's this cool thing. And a lot of the videos I've been making lately are like, okay, I made a paste extruder, I did a whatever, but it's kind of like messing around. It's not like a whole new product. So it's interesting to hear that you've had a similar experience where like once it's good, it dies down. The development happens when things are tumultuous and like still kind of in the process of being fleshed out.
I think that describing it as like a plot arc is a really like interesting way to think about it, because it kind of is. Like as an open source project, you're building a thing, but you're also like telling a story as a community.
Yeah,
like you're kind of like trying to like tell this story so seriously that it becomes like a real thing. Yeah, in the world. I think that it's like I love following with like the feeders. I almost feel like that was like a mini plot arc, is like solving the feeder problems. Like that was like a really cool thing to watch, like how you guys problem solved. And like I loved how you used PCBs for like the feeder wheels. Like there's a lot of cool engineering that went into that I'm sure was like an interesting discussions in the forums. And
yeah, a lot of people with thoughts on how that goes. And it's also interesting, like you were talking about, like you have to read all the docs and get up to speed on that stuff. We tried to make it easier, especially around feeders. There was something about everyone and their mother came into our Discord and was like, you should do feeder addressing this way. Like, how does the feeder know where it is on the machine? Everyone had a different take. Yeah. And we picked a 1-wire EEPROM chip as a result of like 8 different dependencies. Like there was no, once you knew what the constraints were, there was no option. It was a 1-wire EEPROM. That's what we had to do. So we wrote, now in all of our repos, we have a file called design decisions, and it explains why we've done all of this. And it's like, okay, before you dive in, read this. And if you've read this and you're like, nah, you didn't think about XYZ, at least we're all on the same page. At least we all kind of know the same thing. Like, what is that like for you guys? If someone comes, if I came in and into your forums and I'm like, Bar, you should use geared steppers. Like, why are you using servos? This is silly. Like, how would you point me in the right direction on like, why not?
Yeah, that definitely happens. I think it's like a mix of the really funny one is people will come in and be like, hey, what if we did a servo version? And we're like, is this their version?
That's funny.
Instead of use the stepper motors, but it's like the idea of like it not being stepper motors is like the weird one.
Yeah.
But I think it's a mix of like I try to let people know that we have kind of explored that, but also let the conversation run, because sometimes we'll get things that'll come out of those conversations. Just the other day, someone found a bug in our math because there was a function that existed but wasn't getting called at the right place, and it came out of a discussion or something completely different.
Yeah.
Which didn't go anywhere. Like the discussion it came out of was not relevant, but it got people looking at the code base. And then someone was like, hey, where is this function called? And I like looked through the code and I was like, oh, nowhere. Called. You were catching that. So there's erring on the side of more discussion is good, as long as everyone stays civil. You know, you gotta keep it fun for everyone. No one wants to like volunteer to have an argument.
Right. And I also like sometimes people will be like, oh, hey, why is my feeder not feeding this way? Blah, 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 blah. And people will have ideas about maybe why. And like in my head, I'm going, there's no way that's what it is. Like there's no way. But like you said, I don't necessarily want to be, maybe I'm wrong. I'm wrong all the time. It would be cool if I were wrong, because then I'd have a cool answer to what it is. Like, so I don't want to be like, no, it's not that, because I don't know that for sure. I can't ever be 100% sure of literally anything. I can only have a really good guess. So to be like, well, here's this line in the code that makes me think that's probably not what's going on, but would love your thoughts on this. Like, I don't want to send people down the primrose path. I think I'm using that phrase right. I don't want to send them down a path that like, it's not right, and like they're going to waste their time kind of pursuing this. But I still want that conversation to happen. I still want people to have those thoughts about that kind of thing. And that's a weird one to balance as well, I think.
I think that's an incredibly good point of like, I feel like that attitude of being like, I don't know anything for 100% certain, and I'm willing to be wrong on anything. And I'm even excited to be wrong, because if I'm wrong, I learned something, right? Like if I thought it was weird and it turns out another way. Yeah. Because we're trying to make the best thing we can make. And if you have a way to make it better than how I thought I was going to do it, that's a win for everyone.
Right.
But I think that attitude is incredibly critical to doing an open source project. and is also somewhat rare in the world of engineering. I think that in the world of engineering, there's a lot of people who feel like there's a right way to do things.
Yeah.
Who are not super open to hearing other perspectives.
Yeah.
And being wrong, just being wrong.
Yes. It's hard to be told you did something stupid. Like you have to put your ego aside and be like, I'm here to make the project better. Swallow the pride. Like, this is good. That can be a tough thing to do.
And being so being so transparent, you can't hide anything. Every code mistake I've ever made is public.
Yeah.
Like, you can look at it and be like, oh man, he misspelled that word in every single spot. Like,
yeah.
Pull requests, they'll just be like, hey, I'm just like changing the spelling of like integrate. And I'll just be like,
yeah. Yeah. There's no secrets. It's like when you can see the whole system architect, it's like, I can see exactly what's going on there. It's, it's tough. You're putting it all out on the line for anyone to criticize. How do you deal with it when maybe people are a little more aggressive about their criticism than other? Like, how do you keep things feeling good in your forums and managing that when people maybe don't have the best nuance in telling you that something could have been done better?
I don't know. How do you guys do it? I mean, it's tough. I think it's like, I think that, this was actually an offline conversation we had in our Lost chats.
Mm-hmm.
The conversation about like, we had a great conversation about this, where it's like giving people the benefit of the doubt and being like, all right, like, let's talk it through. Mm-hmm. Then also be like, is this maybe about something else? They're like, what's going on here? Or like,
yeah. Giving them the space to, so that it's maybe not about what your project is, but maybe it's something else going on, like, yeah.
Is everything okay, man?
yeah. Is everything okay?
Sometimes I feel like people just need to talk to a human. And if you like hear a human on the other side who's like, hey, I hear what you're saying and like, I'm interested in learning from you, I think people generally sort of calm down and are because if someone's being heard, I don't think they need to be aggressive, Like if their thoughts are being given real consideration and we're like, as a community, we're like, hey, that's a new perspective. Like, let's hear it out. I think people don't get upset. And also the other nice thing about being open source is like everyone has the option to do anything they want.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like do it my way. Like you can fork and you can make anything. And it's like, if you can make it better, like we're all going to benefit.
Yeah. I think it's a similar thing. Like hearing people out, I think is the best. Like if people start to get into like a fight, and I think it's also different between, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Bar, because I have not spent nearly as much time in discourse as you have, but we have a Discord community and it's like IRC. It's quick. I mean, people will have back and forth, a bunch of messages. And I feel like in discourse, it's like, it's a forum. It kind of makes you pump the brakes a little more. It's not real time. You can't see someone's typing. I think, right? Like it's a little bit more, it's like halfway between an email and a text message. So things might feel a little bit more, they can't escalate very quickly suddenly because there isn't like a live chat. Is that fair to say, do you think?
I think that's a super fair to say. Yeah. I think I actually struggle with Discord and the speed of it just because I like to like take a step back and think about things sometimes. And I feel like I'll just get behind in the conversation and they're just like, I don't even know what's going on anymore. Whereas Discourse, it's funny that the names are so similar.
Yeah.
Discourse, like you said, it's a forums. It's very slow. You'll have a conversation that'll be quiet for a week and then someone will post something new. Like it's like, it even has built-in features. Like if you reply to the same person more than twice in a row, it'll be like, hey, like this is a conversation for everyone.
Yeah.
Like, do you mean to keep replying to just one person?
Right. Yeah.
I'm having a conversation with this guy. Yeah. I mean to keep replying to him. Like,
yeah.
Instead.
Yeah.
The system is intentionally built around that slow and like bringing more people into the conversation.
Oh, that's nice.
And I also think the publicness of it, like the persistence, maybe makes people be a little bit less mean or just encourages kindness because it's like your words are going to continue. They're not going to get buried in the conversation too quickly.
Right.
Like they're kind of going to sit there for, and we'll have people edit posts too. Sometimes someone will say something when they're upset and then they'll be like, hey, I thought that through and I'd like to like edit my post to, that was an overreaction or something. Like
sure.
people, I don't know, everyone's pretty good for the most part.
Yeah. Wow. That is nice. I do like the persistence of it as well. We've been talking with Ryan, V1 Engineering Ryan, about, the forum is a huge searchability thing. People can find stuff better, and there's a lot of folks that are active in our Discord that, like, if you pop in and ask a question, someone will answer. But that relies on someone having to be there to answer them all the time and to search from other people. I mean, forums are really cool, but we also don't want to bifurcate things and go into the forum. It was really good for quick iteration on, like, people trying out different things. It was nice to have that quickness, but for the persistence, like you say, forums are great. So we've been looking into it, thinking about it.
I think the quickness is, like, whenever I am in the Lumen.io Discord, I was in the Lumen.io Discord before we even met in person or anything, just because I thought it was like a cool community. I was just following along, and I don't think I ever posted anything, but I liked things.
Yeah.
A little hard on things, or a thumbs up or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that like, it's like you have a very vibrant community. Like, you step into that community and it feels like alive, and like people are excited, and like there's discussions happening, and it's like, oh wow, we're like getting stuff done, which is cool. It's a cool feeling.
Yeah, it is cool. And it's a place to also talk. I mean, maybe, I don't know if your forum is like this too, but like, we have channels. I mean, we have a whole thing about this podcast, and there's going to be a thread about this episode of the podcast in the Discord, and people can chat specifically about this. And we have like a mid-scale manufacturing, other people that are just trying to run a hardware business, and we can talk about stuff there. And, do you have other things broken out where your community will talk about kind of other errata there as well? Do you find that happens in your forum?
We don't really. It's very rare. I mean, we have like an off-topic section, and people will post things occasionally. But to be honest, I don't think I've seen a post in there this month. Like, it's like not a core part of what gets discussed. Something that I've been trying to think about recently is, we had our when we were doing more of like scrappy trying to figure everything out, I think that our forums did feel more of a community in terms of people were discussing things, just being friends. Like, right. I feel like I made genuine friends in there, whereas like I just like hanging out with these people online.
Yeah.
And I think that right now, since we've sort of come back as Maslow 4, our forums have become a little bit more of a support forum where we're just helping people troubleshoot issues, which is super important. But something I'd like to put energy into in the not distant future is building more community. We do a project of the week contest that helps, but just like that idea of sharing things that you made, and not necessarily being there because you have an issue, being there, or even because you want to contribute to the hardware, just being there because you're part of it.
Right. Yeah, there really are pluses and minuses, because like we don't do any support in our Discord because it's for the community alone. So we tell them, hey, bring it to our Opula support forum. Do you guys have your own dedicated support for like Maslow, the company?
We don't. We just use the forums.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. There's so many different ways to play it. It's such a, what that spread looks like is fascinating. Like how people settle. Because every time you resolve a problem, someone can Google it and find out how that happened, which is something we don't have.
Yeah. We wanted to keep it all public because, one, someone can Google it and find out. Two, if there's recurring issues, we get to see a pattern publicly emerge where it's like, hey, there's this other person had this same issue. Here's what worked for them. You can like link to it. Or we can just be like, hey, we had 4 people have this issue this week. Let's find a software fix. Right. Let's bring this up as a
it's
priority.
A thing now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If it's a one-off thing, it's like, maybe it's, not a widespread issue, but if it's like recurring, it's like, okay, we got to like figure out what the root cause here is. And like, maybe it's the instructions aren't clear enough. Maybe it's that there's a software bug. Maybe we need to like, change how something's designed. Like, we'll figure out what the cause is and fix it.
I feel like early adopters are super like into that style of like community engagement and that style of like support being offered. I was curious to know if there's a lot of like B2B traction for the Maslow yet.
We don't do any B2B stuff. We even like discourage people. Like when people contact us and they're like, hey, I'm a woodworking business. I just don't think we're quite yet at a point where it's good enough to be used in a professional context. Like our goal is to be the cheapest and the most accessible and just like get machines in the hands of people. But there are like, if you're making a living on a machine, it's worth spending the $20,000 for like a really good one. And we push people in that direction. Because I don't want to be in a position where someone's livelihood is jeopardized because of like my bug.
Sure. Yeah. That's a very different relationship you now have with the thing. Like it's a different tier of stress and expectation of the product.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that it's not even really our goal to get there eventually. Like we are not aspiring to be the prosumer version of what we do. We're aspiring to be the one that everyone can afford to have.
If someone bought it against your hedging and used it for their business, does seeing them use it successfully change your tune on it? Like when you see someone set it up and they're like, yeah, I'm using it for my business and it's great. Are you like, well, it might be a great way to get started in the business? Like, or is it just kind of not a relationship you want your users to have with the thing, full stop?
No, I mean, people use them in businesses and they're stoked. And they're some of our best users because they're like putting the hours in, it's like,
sure.
And we're like, all right, I'll like release a new firmware update and I'll be like, all right, give me feedback, everyone. And like the people who get back the quickest are the people who are using it like every day. It's like, this is my hobby project. Like, sure, I'll like update and do some tests, but I can't do it this weekend. It'll be next weekend.
Right.
Weeks. Like we're going to be 4 firmware versions down from there. Like,
sure.
So, I think it is valuable. I just want to make sure that they come into it with the understanding of like what we're trying to do, because we don't want to be ever misleading anyone. I think especially early on, it was a big issue in terms of there were no other affordable large format CNC routers. Mm-hmm. So people were like, should we buy this or should we buy a shop bot? And I really feel like I had to make it clear that like one of these things is $500. One of these things is $30,000. They do not do the same thing. They are different products and they're both cool. Like we don't think we made ShopBot for 1% of the price. We think we made a different thing.
Yes. That's and we will do that as well. But we draw a different line because we want businesses to use it. That's a lot of the reason why we made it is especially for that. But there are some times where people are like, yeah, I want to move this many units a year. And it's like a crazy hype. Mm-hmm. It's like they want to do full scale production on the thing. Right. And it's like, no, I do not recommend the Lumen for this. It's not going to do what you want. That's not what it's for. It's meant to be to fill this specific niche. And we know what that is from hearing customers say of like, oh no, it's really useful in this way. That's where we don't want to sell it to someone that's not going to have a good time with it. Like that's antithetical to the point of why we're doing it. And like, it's also stressful because they're going to be expecting it to do something that it can't. That just sucks,
Totally. Yeah. I thought in the trade show episode was one of my favorite episodes. I thought that was like all time great podcast episode.
Thanks.
I was literally like in the car. I was like, yes, that's so true.
That's how I met you. I mean, it was literally at a quote unquote trade show, more or less, but like in Ryan in person, like all that kind of stuff. And Chris? No, we met Chris at Murph, but yeah, we saw him there. Yeah.
Yeah. But I thought what you said about talking about, like the idea of like, when I think of, we're like, when I prototype something, I'm looking at 2, 3, 4 boards. But the idea that when like, Lexus prototypes something, they're doing the prototype run of like 200 boards makes sense because they're, for them, that cost is not significant. They're like, sure, whatever. We spent like $7,000 on components. For me, that's like, I spent $7,000 on components. Like I better be selling them.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. But like, until you talk to those people, you don't know. And that's another cool thing about being open is like, as people are using it and messing around with it, they're going to find other weird stuff to use it for. It's going to help inform how it's useful. Because you might have an idea in your mind about where it's going to be beneficial. But like, I don't know. Like one of my favorite examples is Glowforge. And Glowforge because they're like right down the street from you, aren't
you? Literally next door. I can see them. You lean forward.
That's crazy. What? That's so cool. They have a section on their website for realtors.
Really?
And I was like, what? Why? And they must have sold enough to enough realtors and realized that realtors love this for like a welcome home gift for people that just bought their house or signs or like cute little things to. Yeah. There are enough realtors that bought this. They made this a first element vertical on their website for people to do that. No one at Glowforge starting a laser cutter company is like, yes, this will change the game for realtors. Like no one had that thought. You had to have those people tell you. You had to see that from how it lived in the market for a little bit.
Yeah. And I think that like seeing that immediate feedback is one of the huge benefits of being open. Is like you can get even faster. What developments get traction? Where does the community really rally behind like, let's add this feature versus like, yeah.
What's important to them. So also we crazy buried the lead here. We're recording this on November 12th. Yesterday, November 11th, 2024, you launched another Kickstarter for Maslow and you're already like 800% funded as of this morning in like 12 hours. So like, congratulations. And also if you're listening, check the show notes. We'll put a link to the Kickstarter. It'll still be live by the time this comes out. So go check it out and pull a trigger on one if you want a Maslow. But Kickstarter is how you guys do this. I want to ask you about like, why Kickstarter? Kickstarter works so well for you guys. They take a cut. And I know you said that it's a way that you kind of tell the story, but like, do you find that you sell more units through Kickstarter? Like if you launched on your forum, like I did a really small Kickstarter a few years ago and they put me on the front page and they said, hey, this is projects we love. And I barely made it through for funding. So it's like, are they actually putting that many new people into your project? Like why the Kickstarter route? Because I'm sure you could just do it independently now at this point if you wanted to.
Yeah, I think that's something we think about a lot. I have such a love-hate relationship with Kickstarter.
Really?
Well, yeah. Yeah, they had me speak for them at Maker Faire one year.
No way, dude. That's so cool. I didn't know that.
They like, they paid for a booth and they had me speak and I got up there and I was like, I just like gave a very honest like assessment of Kickstarter. I was like, I don't know what's worth the money. Like a lot of the stuff on there is scam. There's upsides or there's downsides. Like you associate your brand with Kickstarter. People are like, this will never deliver.
Yeah.
I have a real mixed feelings about it. I do like that it creates a sense of people getting to be part of creating something, which I think is one of the magic. The magic of open source is it goes both ways. It's like, it's magical for us that we get the feedback and the help of like how to make our thing better. Sure. It's like we get direct, like pull requests, people making it better. And we also get feedback of like, hey, really engaged consumers who are like, hey, this step in the instructions is unclear. Like, this, even people emailing us pictures being like, hey, this step is unclear. Here's the picture that actually shows what I didn't understand. And be like, wow. That level of feedback is really helpful. And I think Kickstarter is set up around the idea that like, it makes it clear to people that this exists because they bought it.
Right. Yeah. It feels like more collaborative inherently because it's a Kickstarter.
Exactly. Okay. I think there's a category of people who don't necessarily have the time to, be making pull requests or be like, engaged day to day, but who want to like support, be part of that process of making something a real thing in the world. Yeah. And I think that's really cool. I think the Kickstarter platform is pretty mediocre. I don't think they do much recommending of people. I don't feel like their algorithm like pulls in that many more people. They do take a cut. I don't think that like the platform itself is like pretty clunky. Like there's so much like, someone wants to change their address or something and it's just like, oh my God, I'm going to have to go into Kickstarter and like deal with their system.
Yeah.
So I've mixed. I don't think I would like blanket across the board, be like, I recommend Kickstarter, but I do like the narrative aspect of like, it makes it really clear to people that it's like, we're not selling a product to consumers. Like we are building a thing together. Right. And like, if they stop showing up, it will stop existing. Like it only exists because people made it exist.
You don't feel like Kickstarter is really bringing people in? Like you guys got crazy funded in like 24 hours. Is this from your forum? Like, are you posting it? Like, where are these people coming in from, if not from the Kickstarter platform itself?
Yeah, great question. I think it's a mix of what we do is weird enough that people get excited about it and share it.
Fair.
Kind of the only one. And then also we hadn't been selling kits. We sold out of kits sort of like 3-4 months ago. So we had like a backlog of people who wanted them but couldn't get them.
Okay.
Also, this Kickstarter is primarily a hardware update to our existing kits. Yep. So we just sent out an email to everyone who, had previously bought one and we were like, hey, here's the update coming out. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think that was, a big part of it.
Sure.
Also, yeah, I think it's just, it's worked for us over the years and I like it a lot. I don't know that I would promote it.
Fair enough.
I will not be invited back to speak for Kickstarter.
But you spoke how you felt about the thing, and like that's rad.
I love that bar.
Yeah, that's cool.
But I also think that Kickstarter, like, we're talking a lot about getting feedback and like understanding it. I think that Kickstarter really needs to take like an honest, hard look at like getting feedback and maybe improving their platform, because the way their business model works is they take a cut before anything else happens.
Right.
It's in their best interest for me to promise I'm going to build you a fusion reactor for like, $200 and like raise, $2 million on Kickstarter or whatever, and then not deliver.
Right. Because they still get the cut of that.
They get the cut of that. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Whereas like if I come to you and I'm like, hey, I can do this, like this is a reasonable price, reasonable timeline, reasonable thing to do, that's going to raise less money because you're not promising the moon. And if Kickstarter is going to get less money from that, but it actually like delivers a thing. So,
right. Yeah.
I think they're a little bit, their own business model is sort of like biasing their incentives, which I don't know.
So if you had a different platform to collect feedback progressively that Kickstarter kind of tries to do, like another way of having people feel like they're part of development. Honestly, dude, the way I'm thinking about this is like our YouTube stuff similar to you on Kickstarter, because it's like, where are people following the narrative arc of production? It's a very similar kind of thing. So if you had another place where you could do that, would you maybe not use Kickstarter and like have another place where you kind of give people that close connection on like, here's what's going on?
That's a really interesting question. I think so, but I also think that we've spent a lot of time learning how to sort of tell a story through the Kickstarter platform. Mm-hmm. And like, I think that it would be risky to try to transition that to something else. Like we do a weekly Kickstarter update. Like we have a lot of things that we've built up over time of like learning how to do that. Mm-hmm. And I think that I don't, blanket advocate Kickstarter, but I do feel like it's something that I've done a few times and have some like understanding of. We also have a YouTube channel and we're like active on YouTube. Videos are hard.
Yeah.
Production quality on your videos is wild. And they're like, they're so good and they're so regular. And like, you really do a great job at that. And I think for us to be able to like produce quality content on that kind of schedule and engage with our audience on YouTube, it would just be a lot of work. I haven't found another platform, but I think you're totally right about that. Like, how do you build a platform that helps you like tell your story?
Have people feel like they're part of it.
So people can be part of it.
Yeah.
Like, it's like we really truly are, how do we get people involved? That's really interesting to think about though. I hadn't even really thought about like, what else could we do other than Kickstarter?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it is nice that like part of the way that you have them involved is also fiscally. Like people are on the ride because they have a buck in the game. And that is a different thing than like, Joe Schmo who likes to watch a goofy kid on YouTube talk about a pick and place machine, but has no interest in buying one.
Right.
Like the people that are part of your community are really in it. Like they're getting one. And us, we filter down from YouTube who are like, people just like to watch the videos and maybe they don't care about the pick and place. And then Discord is like, people care a little more about it. So we have this funneling step. Everyone in your thing is in it, full stack, which is a nice benefit of it as well. Cause they come with the fact they've already spent the money on it. So,
yeah, I think that is really, really valuable for us. And then I think it's also really valuable for us sort of getting the money up front. Like a lot of what we do is like we're doing a Kickstarter now because we needed the money. Like, it's like, we're like, we want to make these upgrades. I don't feel like I was a little bit like, is anyone going to buy them? It turned out they were, but
yeah, no kidding. A lot of people did.
It's a little bit scary to be like, all right, I'm going to like invest the money up front and then like hope that it, pays off.
Right.
I think it maybe lets us have smaller margins. It's like, we can be like, hey, we know what our costs are going to be. We can figure out if we get the money up front, there's sort of a risk premium, Right. It's like if you tell me I'm going to have a 50% chance of making $5, it's like, I got to charge you $10 for that thing. Because it's like a 50% chance I'm going to lose that $5.
Right.
But if you tell me there's 100% chance I'm going to make $5, it's like I can do take that deal for $4.99 because it's like
sure. There's no ambiguity about it. You already have the money in your pocket.
It also seems like a beautiful thing too, where like, let's take Stephen's glow tie, for example. He knew if he'd sold 10 through 100 of them, he's going to be hunkering down, hand soldering them because aluminum doesn't exist yet. But he also knew if he got 1,000 orders, he's going to have to approach a factory. And like, when the campaign ends, you understand exactly what you need to do. And a lot of ambiguity is like out the window.
Yeah. And you've almost by definition raised the correct amount of money to facilitate that option. You know, like if I sold 1,000 of them, I'd have enough money for an injection molding die. I sold 100 and I had enough money to spend nights and weekends in my apartment soldering PCBs together.
Just no lifing hit.
Yeah. Yeah.
But look what came out of that. Like, look where we are now. Like that was like a transformative thing for the world. Like Stephen being frustrated soldering glow ties in his apartment, like led to like various unaccessible, like the next person who has that problem doesn't have that problem anymore.
Right. And we think a lot about like in our like potential users, we think about glow tie Stephen a lot.
It comes up in the video still. Like I can tell that you think about it still. It's like you talk about it and like,
like if there's some punk that did a small Kickstarter for a light up bow tie and it's a pain to put it together. Like what was really cool is I went back into my finances of the Kickstarter, the glow tie Kickstarter, and I made just over $2,000, which is the cost of aluminum. I was like, wow, okay. I could have paid for the machine with the Kickstarter. That's cool. And like, I also could have built it if need be. Yeah. And it's weird that straddling that with like, you know, can a home gamer do it as we'll call it sometimes? Like, can the home gamer use aluminum and also can like a very, very large like manufacturing company also find value in it? That's a weird thing to straddle. But yeah, it's very weird.
Bar, how do you want this machine to like help people make things? Like it seems like you're trying to make CNC more accessible and even like the like surrounding software.
I had access to a laser cutter in college and I really fell in love with that. Like you can draw something on the computer and make it into a real physical thing. And I think just that, like sharing that experience of like more people being able to like take a digital design and make it real is like the dream. I think just getting that in everyone's hands, I think it's really transformative. I think that overall the internet has brought us so much wealth in the sort of like digital world of our ability to have access to information and music and movies and like community and all those kind of things, but it hasn't touched the physical world that much. So I think that bridge from the digital world to the physical world is really exciting.
Yeah.
So I think that how I would like to see it change the way people make things, I think is really in the sort of like collaborative space, like the idea that one person can post a design and someone else can cut it out. I think there's a lot of really exciting opportunities there. Yeah.
That's a really cool mission, man.
Well, I think the reason I've like been following along with Lumen stuff is it feels really connected. It's like this idea that like the everyman, the home gamer can have access to these sort of like tools of production that make it so you can make things. Because there's like a whole category of things that I could in theory make by hand, but I wouldn't. Right. But if I had a Lumen or I knew someone who had a Lumen, or it's like just the fact that that technology exists, it democratizes like a whole class of things, which is incredibly powerful.
Yeah. And I'm sure you could go on this for like an hour, but 3D printers almost have it easy where like they share an STL file and people can print the widget. Like you can't really send your friend G code to go cut out because like your friend's wood might be thicker or thinner and or they might have a different end mill. So like making these designs and repositories shared 3D printing style, like what an uphill battle. And it seems like you're trying to take a swing at it too.
Yeah, we have some really exciting software stuff that I don't know if I'm quite ready to share it, but there's some stuff in the works that like tackles that problem that I'm working on that is like sort of the next big thing we have in the pipeline. So sneak peek it's coming.
Oh yeah.
That's so cool.
Thanks for taking me on that tangent, It was awesome to hear you speak towards that.
I think it's an awesome question. I feel like that's like that and the idea of like the narrative arc of like as an open source project, you're kind of telling a story is like really powerful.
About the project itself and like how it grows and gets better and how other people contribute to it. Because if it just feels like this static, bland thing that exists and like it's cool, but having there feel like there's a momentum and a narrative behind it makes it so much easier to bite, you know, like when I saw you at Open Sauce, I'm like, that's the dude from the tested video. I mean, like I pulled that, and then following the arc along with Azure Kickstarter every Wednesday, when you send that update, I get that ding on my phone and whoop, and I'm going through and I'm reading that right as it comes through. And I feel like I'm coming along for that journey, and you get so much more of a buy-in in your community by having that narrative come with it. It's really cool. It's really cool. It's interesting the different ways, you know, we found to kind of get that same end result.
And I think you are coming along on that journey. Like, I think that it's easy to be like, I'm just reading and following along, but like our PCB supplier is someone you introduced us to. It's like,
oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But by like following along, it's like when there's that thing where you're like, I know the answer to this question.
Yeah.
The fact that there's people following along who feel like they're not actually part of, like, you're not, you know, in our discourse every day kind of thing, but you are a major contributor. Like, by being there when there's that moment where it's like, we need help with this thing and who's the expert, it's like the person comes out of the woodwork if they're following along and is like, hey, I actually know the answer to that question.
Right.
And it might seem trivial for you. You're just like, hey, yeah, I know a guy who's like good at that. Yeah. But for me to find that person is a lot of work and a lot of risk of like taking, you know, dealing with the wrong people and time. And it's like, if you can just answer that question, it's so easy for the right person to answer it, but it's so easy to get the answer wrong if you don't know.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I totally forgot about that. That's awesome.
Yes, it wasn't even that big of a deal for you.
Yep.
But it's always so fulfilling to be able to advise like a hardware company in the right direction and help them avoid a major pitfall, because it's exactly like what you said. We've done it before. We've gotten hurt. We've gotten up. And if we can share that and prevent someone from making a similar mistake, it almost feels like our obligation to, at least for me.
Or even if we don't know the answer to it and we're just like, yep, you might get kicked in the teeth on this one. Like, we don't know either. It just kind of stinks. And like, it's still helpful to commiserate about that kind of thing as well.
Totally. Even just being like, yeah, that's hard. It's like nice to hear sometimes, because it's like, okay, at least it's not just me. I'm not just you're wrong.
Right. Yeah.
This is hard. I just got to stick with it.
Sure.
All right, folks, that's it for this one. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. It helps us out a ton. You can learn more about Opulo at opulo.io, as well as YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and now Blue Sky. Email us at podcast@opulo.io with questions or comments on the episode. And to keep up to date with the podcast and Opulo, sign up for our newsletter where we write blog posts and conduct customer interviews with other folks building open hardware. Bar, where can people find you?
MaslowCNC.com is the best place to find us. That'll have links to all of our other presences.
Heck yeah. That's it. We'll see y'all in the next one.
Thanks, everybody.
See ya. Figure out how I'm going to hook to that. I don't shoot from the hip as well as Stephen here.
You've gotten real good though, dude.
All right. You get to watch it happen, Bar.